In tonight's Political Insider, more on the climate countdown. To recap, roughly 150 world leaders kicked off 2 weeks of make-or-break negotiations to finalize a sweeping global agreement. It would cut carbon emissions in efforts to stave off climate change. President Obama called the Paris meeting an act of defiance against terrorism. It comes in the wake of ISIS attacks on Europe and beyond. For more, I'm joined by Anthony Adragna, Capitol Hill environment reporter for Bloomberg BNA. Anthony, before we get to the UN climate conference itself, I'd like some context. The Obama administration has one set of climate objectives. Congressional Republicans have another. I'm guessing those goals are pretty different. Tell us about them.
Sure. President Obama has made climate change one of the signature issues for him, and in the second half of his presidency, he calls it an immediate national security threat and has taken strong action here at home. He's issued a set of regulations to curb carbon emissions from power plants and a host of other actions as well. Congressional Republicans are opposed to most of those actions, and a lot of them are unsure about whether or not man-made activity is contributing to climate change. So the landscape really could not be any more starkly different going into these talks.
Now, today, President Obama said the private sector needs to have a seat at the table. You're following input from Microsoft, AT&T, Google, GM, BP, and Coca-Cola. What will they unveil in Paris?
A lot of those companies have already taken action going into the talks. 81 companies at the White House announced they were in strong support of a deal several months before the talks. Now, just today, we've had an announcement from a lot of the leaders of those companies, led by former Microsoft head Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, pushing to create a fund to launch push for new clean energy technologies, a multi-billion-dollar fund to be put into research and development of new technologies that they say could help fight climate change.
Now, Mr. Obama took several cabinet-level officials with him to these talks. What role will they play, and where will Obama come in?
President Obama was here for the first day of talks. He'll be in Paris for another day, where he is there essentially to jumpstart negotiations. He wants to generate momentum at the start of these talks. Now, a host of other cabinet-level officials, EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy, Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz, Secretary of State John Kerry will be there at various points throughout the 2 weeks of negotiations in Paris. They're there to play a host of different roles, and Secretary Kerry is predicted to be the one that will ultimately usher forward a final deal.
Now, Anthony, as we've seen activists try to draw attention to this summit over the weekend, they demonstrated in cities around the world, including here in Washington. That said, the average American tends to be indifferent about climate talks. Is anything different this time around?
Well, certainly what supporters of the talks would tell you is that things are different this time. You've seen unprecedented support from the interest in the business industry and trying to get a deal done. You've seen 150 world leaders gather in Paris today, which is unprecedented almost to have that many leaders in one place. And also polling released today shows that 66% of Americans support a strong deal coming out of Paris. So what observers would say is, yeah, there's momentum here that hasn't been there before, and unprecedented interest from various segments of the American economy.
Let's talk about everybody involved, because there are a lot of players at the table. China and India, for example, with their own set of unique motivations. What does success look like to you?
I think what people would tell you that have followed these talks for a long time is that whatever comes out of Paris will not be an immediate solution to climate change and won't generate a final solution to the problem. What they're looking to accomplish in Paris is to, for the first time, develop a framework whereby all the various nations in the world agree to tackle climate change, and they want to establish a framework whereby people can make pledges for the actions they'll take, but then also establish a framework for evaluating what actions have been taken to see if those are successful, and a way that countries can ratchet up their actions in the future depending on how successful their initial actions are.
You're painting a fairly rosy picture. Is there any pushback to any of this?
There certainly is, and what we expect to see in Congress this week are several votes to undermine the centerpieces of President Obama's efforts to address climate change here at home, those power plant regulations. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell just this weekend issued an op-ed saying that any deal would be dead on arrival and questioning whether the president had the authority to pursue this sort of agreement. So there certainly is significant opposition here in Congress. It's unclear what exactly congressional Republicans can do to undermine the deal, but they're certainly going to make their voices heard.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that. Anthony Adragna with Bloomberg BNA. Thanks for the update, Anthony.
Thank you.